Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jensen Werley. I'm a reporter at Denver Business Journal. This is Bhavna. And Bhavna and I have spoke before, and we interviewed when you became the new site lead for Google Boulder. And when we spoke, you mentioned how you lead a team and how you care about healthy teams. And I thought that we could maybe dive into that a little bit today.
Absolutely.
Great. So tell me, and for everyone, what makes a healthy team?
Okay. So my perspective on a healthy team is a very strong component of a healthy team is this term we use called psychological safety. And really, psychological safety is about team members being able to take risks as well as be vulnerable to each other. So that's a really important factor in building a healthy team. From a selfish team lead perspective, a healthy team is also about being dependable, a team that delivers on time, and then a team that has members that are passionate about what they're doing, or at least highly interested. I guess not all of them have to be super passionate, but at least have a modicum of interest and are just happy to be there. And lastly, I would say a team that really allows for a diversity of viewpoints and is inclusive of people that are different than they are. That to me is a healthy team.
Great. So setting up that sort of definition, why is it so important to you personally to make sure that your team is operating in that healthy mindset? Why not just sort of allow for it to chug along, maybe just allow for the alternative, which I guess would be an unhealthy team?
That'd be a disaster.
Great. Doesn't sound great, but you care so much about it, and I guess the question is why?
Yeah, so I mean, through experience, what we know is that a healthy team is one that, first of all, retains employees, right? It's very expensive for us to have turnover. Employees leave, they take knowledge with them, then we've got to hire, we've got to train new people, especially. So I'm very much approaching this from a tech perspective. I'm an engineering director, and the teams I lead are mainly engineering, and even in my role as site lead, we have a site that has a diversity of job types, all the way from what we call our HR people operations, to technical sales, to tech, but it's still predominantly tech. So especially in the tech industry, there's a certain amount of investment in folks, and so retention is really important. The other part is healthy teams, as I had mentioned earlier, deliver on time. That to us is really important. Innovation, when we're trying to innovate, that takes a certain amount of vulnerability and risk taking. Healthy teams innovate, and at Google, we're all about innovating. And so I think that, and actually lastly, healthy teams have more fun. And we definitely are about working hard and having fun. And I want to come to a workplace where I'm enjoying myself.
Sure, absolutely. So. Google Boulder, it's 1,300 people, maybe a little bit more. So how do you build a healthy team at scale, especially when we're talking about massive scale? And then not only that, but then you have to sort of build it up to the entire corporate scale, which is gigantic.
Yeah, it is gigantic. I like that word. So again, going back, Google is a tech company. So we did what we know how to do in tech. We ran experiments and we collected data. So Google's people operations folks have, and some associated groups have run experiments through the years and come up with, based on data we've collected, we've come up with what we consider optimal team structure to have a healthy team. In addition to that, we have come up with, or these folks, have come up with certain attributes that a manager needs to have to lead a healthy team. And those attributes are sent out. They are very much a core part of our manager training and a core part of our values. And so the way that we operate at scale is really making sure that our managers embody those attributes of leading a healthy team. Second, we are diligent about, so every 6 months, we have this performance review process. Employees get to rate their managers. They get to give feedback on their managers, mainly based on those attributes, but generally as well. So we're always iterating. We're looking at what employees are saying about different managers, and we work with the managers to improve. Also, part of this whole research that came, this body of research that talked about healthy teams, they have manager training, employee training, and then team activities. So we talk about training in bias busting. And then one that I actually took not too long ago, which is really looking at our unconscious bias. You know, I went in thinking I'm not biased. Went into that class and I found out, yes, indeed, I have some unconscious bias. So it's that sort of regular revision of where we are in our values. And then we've got team activities. We've got strengths finder courses and life path courses where we teams look at each other's journey to recognize who we are as human beings. So between the feedback loop and then all the training and the fact that this permeates our culture is how we scale.
Can you maybe give an example of how that iterating process has changed a policy at Google Boulder or changed the way that you do things?
You mean based on feedback?
Yeah, like how, when is the time that the data that you collected actually resulted in change?
That's a good question. I can think of a couple of examples. The most obvious one is we used to have a process where we collected feedback on managers as part of this bigger generic survey we would send out. And then we heard back from people that they wanted to be very directed and people wanted to give feedback more often on their managers, just so that the managers weren't on best behavior. We had recency bias and a much more detailed questionnaire. So we changed that process. So that's one. In addition, one of the feedbacks we got was that we talked about how we want to foster collaboration. But at the end of the day, especially in the tech field, right, people are just focused on getting their work done and moving fast. And it got us thinking about how we could really emphasize some of the healthy team concepts and collaboration that's important. And one of the things we heard from employees is that we weren't valuing citizenship enough. So we actually added that as another parameter in our performance review process. We now explicitly talk about each employee and what they're doing from a citizenship perspective. Now, if they have none, we don't necessarily, they're not necessarily bad. We don't ding them, but we reward people that actually are doing extra work to help their teammates out.
You mean like a citizen of Google, the company?
Yeah, so not, sorry, I didn't mean a citizenship from a country perspective.
Well, I know that you're also very involved in the community as well. Yeah.
Right, and that can be part of citizenship too. So it can be, so citizenship might be a plethora of things, like someone who took the time and trouble to document some piece of code because it helps other people out, or someone who did some extra volunteering, volunteered with an activity at the site, Google Boulder, or someone who went out and volunteered in the community. We consider all those to be parts of just showcasing that we need to be engaged with each other as a community.
So you've found a way to sort of quantify and think about when employees go above and beyond.
Yeah.
And
so we don't quantify it as much as the engineers would like it. They would like numbers for everything. They would love to see a citizenship score of 6.2 discussed with a citizenship score of 7.8. People stuff is messy, and so it's not precise. We just talk about it, and it turns out when you look at a group of employees, you can tell the folks that show high citizenship value. So I just want to be clear. We have not come up with a magic quantification.
Can't quantify anything yet. Great. Well, you mentioned that psychological safety at the top of our talk. Maybe talk a little bit more about what that is. When I hear it, I think encouraging vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah, it's vulnerability and also risk taking. So a psychologically safe team is, in my view, a team where the people that are part of the team feel like, first of all, they can admit mistakes. And that's really important. That's really important, especially in what we do. Be able to admit mistakes. Be able to admit when they don't know something. Be able to ask for help from other folks. So that's part of the community. And then a large part of this is risk-taking. Again, I will say innovation, and when a company decides to do something that has never been done before, a large part of that, and on everyone's mind is, what if this fails? And if you don't have an environment where failure is okay, then people won't take risks. So that's psychological safety is all of those things. And actually, I forget one more thing, which is being okay with being different. Whether it be, so with me as a woman in tech, usually I'm a minority, and that's okay because people accept me. Or being a person of color, or just coming from a different background, all that is psychological safety.
What is your role as the director of the entire campus? What is your role in making sure that comes from the top to the bottom?
Yeah. So number one, I got this advice a long time ago, and it's so simple, but I really live by it. For number one, I've got to set the right example. I've just got to be a good example. So for me, a large part of the role I play is to model by example. I try my best to, no matter how busy I am, and I have a lot going on right now, professionally, personally, no matter how busy I am, I take the time to meet with the people that report to me, or actually anyone. I take the time to meet them. I take the time to get to know them, to show that I care about their well-being, because that's a large part of it. So that's me setting an example. Also, in order to scale, because I as a one person cannot do this, really myself and my leaders, we look for other leaders that either already embody the values we respect and trust, they've shown that in their work, or we train them, because everyone deserves a chance to be trained and learn about things and so on. So we look for the next level of leaders, and we send them out. And as I was saying earlier, we're very diligent about regular classes in some of the values we hold dear, which is, unconscious bias, how to manage a team, the attributes of a successful manager. So there's that as well. And then among the examples I set, and this is difficult sometimes just because of my background, is I really try hard to not micromanage, even my leaders. So even while we pick people, is my sound okay? Is it messy? I'm going to take this off and see. Does this make a difference? All right. We'll just hold this.
Totally.
Go with the flow.
Looks very normal.
Okay. So, even though I have these firm opinions about, strong opinions, not firm. Let me just soften that. About what a good leader should be, I try not to micromanage.
Right.
So hopefully they're doing the same and they're not micromanaging. And then another culture thing that I work hard, and I'm proud to say the other leaders, senior leaders in the office work hard on, is this notion of results-based performance. What that means is we don't care, really, for the most part, when you're coming to work and leaving, if you're working extra on weekends, if you're taking time off during the week. What we care about is that you're getting work done. Part of that is not micromanaging, but the other part is really being respectful of people's what we call work-life balance. Folks, because of where they are in their life and because of biorhythms, personal preferences, all have a different style of working. And just making sure that we respect that style as long as they're getting their work done. And that's really what we like to focus on. And so I don't watch the clock with anyone on my team, and I encourage my leaders on not doing the same.
So we've talked a lot about, sort of the ways that you create a fair and enjoyable workplace for your employees. When it comes to workplace, what do you think Google Boulder does very well, and where do you think that it could improve?
I'm going to sound like a broken record when I say what we do well is we've created an environment where people, I'd like to think, where people are feel okay with being themselves, with coming across as not just employees but as human beings. You see that in how people come together collaboratively. We have these mailing lists on the site, and a couple of years ago my basement got flooded, and I sent out something and I said, hey, I'm looking for someone to do some water mitigation. I had people volunteering to show up with their trucks to help me move my stuff.
It's very nice.
Yeah. And this was before I became site lead, so I definitely know they were not sucking up to me.
They were just being nice.
This was out of the goodness of their heart. So lest anyone think that this was to get a leg up, this was just people. And this is what people do. So we have this great, this sounds cheesy, but I get goosebumps when I think about this. We have this really cool community where people come together, we celebrate, we have these different employee resource groups, and we celebrate different events that are for different ethnicities or people from different backgrounds, and I love that. I love that, and I think it comes from just an atmosphere of encouraging this psychological safety and vulnerability. People will post and say things like, I don't know how this thing works. Can someone come help me? And that's the ultimate in vulnerability, to post on a mailing list and say, I don't know how this works. Yeah. Especially for engineers, for any of you that have been around engineers, we like to pretend we know how everything works. We don't really, but that's positive. On the areas that I think we can improve on, the foremost one that stands out in my mind is a challenge we have at Google, overall at Google, not just Google Boulder, and I think it's a challenge that various companies in tech have, and that is, how do we increase the diversity of our workforce? I'm proud to say that at Google, we have fessed up a few years ago saying this is a problem, we're working on it. We release an annual diversity report. Actually, let me put a plug in for that, diversity.google.com. And we publish our numbers. And that is the ultimate, by the way, in vulnerability. We publish our numbers, good or bad. And we publish them. We talk in there. If you go in, it's an interesting read. We typically have something about what worked, what didn't work. And then we talk about how we're going to change things, or what we've learned and what we're going to do in the future. And Google Boulder is a smaller site, than the global Google. We take advantage of all this work that's going on with the groups that are trying to increase this, and so we've got to come along for the ride. We've got to look at innovative ways to attract a more diverse workforce, and that's a whole other big conversation.
Sure. But I do want to ask, so you mentioned that there's an area that you can improve on.
Yeah.
How do you create those feedback loops? So if an employee feels like they do need to speak up or be heard on anything, whether it's day-to-day to macro issues, how do you create those feedback loops where there's a safe place to talk about things?
Safe is an interesting word in there. So let me first talk about the feedback loops we have, and then talk about how we try to bring some safety to it. In terms of feedback loops, we have regular all hands, so not just Google-wide all hands, or even each of the groups. So I'm on a specific team, tech team, and they have all hands, but also I hold site-wide all hands, myself and my support folks. And at these all hands, we present things. Employees can ask us questions. And then we also provide a safe mechanism for employees to ask us questions by way of anonymous online posted questions. So employees can either ask us questions in person, or we have these forums where we go through and read out, and employees can choose to either append their name to that question or leave it anonymous. So that's part of that safety. We'd like to think more and more that employees would just add their name to it, and they do, but we have the anonymous forum. That's one. We have an annual survey, and we take it very seriously. I mean, the annual survey, back when I was in the trenches, I was like, I don't know if anyone listens to this, but I'll write my stuff in there anyway. But it turns out, now that I'm in a position of power, or leadership, not power, sorry.
Now that you're the one who has to read them all.
We're a data-driven company. We look at the data that we get back from employees, and we actually have brainstorming sessions on, we can't try to solve everything. And if you ask this group of people what their problems are, you'll get so much. And so we try to distill it down to what we think the most important ones are based on the data we've received, and we try to do something about it. So that's another forum. And then we just have other anonymous forums where people can send us information. And as an aside, I love how transparent we are. Anyone can write to me and complain to me, and they do. And so I know that system works because I get plenty of complaints.
That's great. I would love to keep asking you questions, but I do want to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions.
I see some people. I think that gentleman over there actually very enthusiastically waved his hand ahead of everyone else.
Thank you. My name's Kan Vu, CEO and ED of the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's interesting. First of all, Google shared a lot of their data back in the Bach days of their human resource. So thank you. I use it a lot about what makes a good manager, not the smartest person, but to your point, the safety, psychological safety. And I'm a huge follower of Abraham Maslow, the whole pyramid of needs and wants. So just plug in for Google there. But the question I have is that Google chose Boulder, and those who live in Colorado for a while knows that it's the Republic of Boulder up there. It's not the most diverse city in Colorado. Actually, it's probably one of the least. Maybe Cherry Creek area would be a little bit less. But how does Boulder's Google site stack up as far as diversity? And I would assume if it mirrors Boulder, then it probably needs a little help in that area. Thank you.
Okay. So, let me think about this a little bit. There were a few different elements there. So one thing I do want to say is that we have a site strategy team that looks at different sites to expand into. The Google Boulder site was established in 2006 as a result of us acquiring a company, and then has grown from that little thing to a larger company. What I want to emphasize is that the employees at the Google Boulder site are not just from Boulder. So I do want to look at that. I was recently looking at some of our data, and I think I saw something like, don't quote me on it, but about 40-ish% of our people live in Boulder. The rest are from surrounding communities. So we do attract talent from surrounding communities in Colorado, as well as actually globally. Really, we have international folks as well as folks from different states. That being said, when you look at the diversity of workforce numbers, I think our problem is not necessarily whether we're in Boulder or if we were in Cherry Creek, though I don't want to get into a battle about which one is less diverse. I think it's more about we have a company that is established in Colorado that does great work, the Boulder site, that I'm really proud of. How do we attract more people from diverse backgrounds, people of color, women, underrepresented minorities, to come work for us? And so for that, being on the engineering side, I don't want to get into the numbers, but I want to just emphasize that our population, our goal is for our population to not be just reflective of, say, Boulder, or even Colorado for that matter, but to be reflective of our diverse consumer base. That's what I'll say.
Great. Well, I think maybe we have time for just one very brief question.
I'll try to keep my answer super brief.
So, lady in the middle.
Hi, are all of your teams local? Because our teams are global. So how do you manage to keep a team together when they're not physically together?
Oh, that's going to be a really long answer. So I'll try to give you, actually, so instead of going into the details, I will point you toward some of this research we've done. So let me just say, while most of our teams are local, the local teams work interdistributed with multiple other global sites. So for instance, the team I'm on is located in San Francisco, Sunnyvale, Hyderabad, Singapore, and Boulder. That's the team I'm on. So we do have teams that are distributed. Here's the interesting thing. Google research shows that a healthy team, you know those factors I talked about, are not impacted negatively by lack of co-location. So as in co-location is not a significant enough factor contributing to a healthy team. There's actually things that can be done. There is, if you will please go Google, Google's research that we have published on, if you look for Google and dynamics of a healthy team, or even Project Oxygen, that's another keyword to look up, there is information there that we've collected. So that's my short answer, because I could give you a longer answer, but I don't have time.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Bhavna, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.